Welcome to Protecting Your Assets, the show about protecting people, property, and most importantly, protecting your ass. I'm your host, Lucky Luciano, and I'd like you to join me for a fast-paced and often fiery discussion about security issues with my co-host, Brian the Angry Man Claman. Whether we're piercing the veil of security, talking your duty of care, or raving about the latest technology, we'll share our thoughts on the issues, the trends that are impacting security today and into the future. So grab a coffee and join us for our latest podcast, and don't forget to like and follow us on our sponsor's website, brianclaman.com. And now let's talk about protecting your assets. Hello and welcome to Protecting Your Assets. It's the Lucky Luciano Cedrone with me, Brian, the Angry Man Claman. Today we're going to be talking about setting expectations and, something that I think we generally do a poor job of in security. And we'll get into that, obviously, as we get into the podcast. But as usual, we're going to listen to Brian's rant over the last couple of weeks in terms of what's keeping him up at night. Brian?
Off by that I may have to start changing my nickname from the Angry Man to Lucky. I am just lucky to have been with you for 33 episodes, and I'm just lucky to work with you and learn from you. And oh my God, I'm such a liar. Anyways, I am angry. What keeps me up at night? I wonder what it might be. COVID, just in time for Christmas. The new variant of COVID, the new version of COVID. I think what's keeping me up at night is my concern that this next version will be problematic one way or the other. The signals that I'm seeing out of officialdom is a little bit disconcerting, and I'm concerned because I think people are tired, and understandably. And I think COVID fatigue is real. I was listening to a broadcast from one notable Canadian journalist, I forget who it was, and he was saying the other day that even the good people, the people that have done all the right things, are fatigued. So the challenge is, how do we, ensure that we do the right things and put this thing to bed in a state where we're 2 years into this almost now and people are fatigued? And that concerns me a little bit. I am worried about, what am I worried about? It's really keeping me up.
Your memory.
I'm worried about my memory. It's really keeping me up at night, and I'm worried about the ability of our leaders to communicate effectively. And I'm really concerned when I listen to the medical community and I listen to the politicians, the political leaders. There's a real disconnect. Case in point, and I'll stop talking about my rant in a second. Doug Ford, who I generally liked, was saying that the vaccine passports are going to go away at the end of January. He said that earlier on in October, November. Based on what criteria would he say that? The science? Because no one is surprised. We didn't expect this variant, but Delta was a real problem that we were expecting this winter. So did it have to do the science, or did it have to do what was good for Ontario? Or is it perhaps there's an election coming up and he wanted to, befriend people that may otherwise not have voted for him? That's what concerns me. That's what keeps me up at night. I just don't trust the decisions, certainly coming out of the politicians. I'll just say one more thing. I don't believe that. Why are you laughing at me? It is, honestly, you're the producer. You can cut me off anytime. But I don't trust the politicians. I trust the scientists. And I'll tell you why. There's nothing in it for them. Okay, they don't have to get reelected. They don't have to say things to keep their job. Most of them, especially the healthcare community, want to get back to a sense of normalcy because they're the ones that are really suffering and struggling. Politicians, on the other hand, are by definitions politicians. They got to worry about politics. They got to worry about being reelected. When I look at what's happening in the States, I see some of it here in Canada. That's what keeps me up at night.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with your points about politicians. I think the communication's been a disaster all the way through, and it continues to be a disaster. We talk about the stupid Q codes now that they've messed that up as well. But anyway, I'm not going to get into the COVID. I'm sick and tired of COVID. To your point, I'm fatigued about COVID. I could care less about Omicron. They just found a new one in France, in case you haven't heard that today. So yay, we got more of this shit ahead of us. But my quick rant is totally different because I'm tired of talking about COVID. And it has to do with the Olympics. and it has to do with the politicians. We got that in common. But really, and it sets us up into what our topic is today. I heard earlier this week when Canada, in all their astute willingness to be quick and to the forefront and all that, our politicians finally decided to boycott the Olympics. Yay!
Like after everyone else, I think.
Yeah, after everyone. Exactly my point.
I think we're number 6 on the Five Eyes.
Yeah, exactly. And so they boycotted the Olympics, which I think was obviously long overdue. They should have been a leader in that, not a follower. But when I listened to the radio on my way into work, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday, and I think it was John Moore that was interviewing. I believe it was the Minister of Foreign Affairs. I'm not 100% sure, but whoever it was had the audacity to respond to the question. So John asked her, if it's okay, since you're boycotting it, and he totally agrees with that, that's fine. The politicians aren't going to go. But how can you feel comfortable about letting our athletes go to China, a country that just recently released 2 prisoners that had no business being prisoners, and they were there for a couple of years because of your incompetence, basically? And the response from the minister was, well, John, we have an outstanding security apparatus that is going to take care of our athletes. And that's exactly what I did. I rolled my eyes like you just did. And I said, are you freaking kidding me? They're going down this road again, setting false expectations. If something goes sideways over there while the athletes are playing, I feel for the athletes, but at the end of the day, it's bigger than you. You may have wasted 4 years of your life preparing for this. The issues on the table right now are bigger than you'll ever be. And it's going to take some courage to make those decisions, tough decisions that say, hey, if you decide to go over there and they decide to arrest you, don't expect us to fly in and take you out. And it's just not going to happen. So that risk is real. Why are we even sending them over there? And I don't want it to be about whether or not we send the athletes over to China. I'm really talking about the fact that the government continuously sets expectations, whether it's about COVID or about the Olympics, that aren't realistic, and it ends up becoming a disaster.
Okay, now that the 2 Michaels are out.
I'm the angry guy. I'm just going to say, you're a little more laid back.
You're motivating me, but you're also the drinker. But now that the 2 Michaels are out, we have focused our attentions, laser focused on Afghanistan to get our interpreters out. And once we finish that in about 3,000 years, we're ready now to take on China. What you don't appreciate, Luke, is that the Chinese are fearful of Justin Trudeau. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
They don't know what to expect. He's a wild card. He's a bit like Trump. They're scared he may have his finger on the button, and he may change the channel from the Chinese news station to CBC. It's a joke. I have only respect for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and the Canadian Security and Intelligence apparatus. They are amongst the best in the world. That said, they're in a foreign country, which is one of the major powers of the world, and the 2 or 3 or 4 or 100 RCMP officers that are going to be unarmed that we send over will not be able to stop the Chinese from doing whatever it is they decide to do.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's continue that on to the topic of the day, which is setting expectations. We've had plenty of debates on this, you and I, because we do have some differences in who we think where the blame should lie. And so I'm interested to hear the discussion today, basically talking about how the clients set up those expectations, or contractors agree to those expectations, whatever you want to, how you want to approach it. But at the end of the day, it's setting up expectations that aren't realistic and basically set the program up to fail. Sort of like, I talked about the politicians setting up our athletes to fail. So that's where we want to go today. And a part of that, we'll be talking about key performance indicators, because you got to be able to measure whether or not you're hitting your expectation, or how do you know you're meeting expectation if you don't have a measurable system in place. So let's start with setting the expectations. What has your experience been, Brian? And what's your thoughts on how the industry sets expectations? Where does it start? Where should it lie? And how do you go about doing that?
I'm going to teach you, Luch. Sit back, take notes, and listen. To me, it's all.
I got a bottle waiting for me.
It's less important to set expectations and more important to manage expectations. And what amazes me is that, especially on the contract security side of the fence, and I understand the business imperative. I mean, if you're not bringing revenue into the business, you don't have a business. So it's hard to say no. I sort of get that. But if you don't manage expectations, if you enter into agreements with clients, okay, which are not properly defined in a prescriptive contract, which doesn't really say what it is you have to do. And then you tell yes, 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 sort of like bobblehead, okay? Yes, we can do it. Yes, we can do it, okay? And the client is happy. The thing that amazes me is that the client's only happy for a second. The happiness fades when you fail to deliver. So I'll give you an example, and I know this firsthand because I'm well connected as you are with the industry, contract and other. And right now with COVID and minimum wage, underpaid security guards, it's hard to get security guards.
Yeah.
And there's never been more demand for security guards than there are now. So what do some companies say or do? Many of them say, yes, 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 we can do it. And they overpromise and they underdeliver. And they make the client happy until the day they're unable to provide the client. And then the client's no longer happy. Yeah. So how's that worked out for them? What have you gained? The other thing is I've worked with clients that wanted my guidance and advice on why does the client hate us? Why is the client thinking we're not performing well? And I always say, let's take a look at the contract. And a contract is more than just a document that says, I'm going to pay you X per hour. It also has a scope of work, and it's got to be a detailed prescriptive scope of work. And I told this one client was saying, well, I don't know what to do. The client, who's a major national client, is asking us to do A, B, C, and D. And we say, okay, we'll do it, but we're going to have to charge them more. And they refuse to. And we just don't know what to do. And I say, well, what's written in the contract? Well, there really isn't a lot in the contract. I said, well, that's your first mistake. You should never enter into an agreement without a prescriptive contract. And if it was a prescriptive contract and the client wants you to do something extra, it's either part of the contract, then you better do it. And if you can't do it, you got a problem. Or if it's not part of the contract and you're doing it as an extra, tell the client that we don't do work for free. We're happy to do it, but this is an extra to the contract. It's going to cost you. That just, these are accidents waiting to happen that we continue to do time after time after time. So I think where you and I differ is that I believe there's two culprits here for this failure. One is the senior security leaders or the people that influence the contract on the client side. And the other is the security companies that are saying yes, like the bobblehead, to any demand. They enter into business without a properly defined contract, and they try and wing it, and that never works out.
Yeah, and I think we agree on that there's both. I think, the blame lies with both, because the contractors, they're going to do whatever the client says. And I hate that term, the client's always right. That's bullshit. Sometimes the client needs to be told he's wrong. Yeah. But the blame is also as much on the client side, who doesn't know what they want, doesn't know what to expect. We've just talked, we're involved with some contracts now where we've talked about the requirements of those contracts, and they're asking for things that damn well they don't understand what they're asking for, right? And so, as a client, we're going to say we can do that, but they don't know what they're asking for. So how can you know what you're getting if you don't even know what you're asking for? Right? It goes back to setting the expectation. If I want a Corvette, do I really know that a Corvette's going to cost me extra money for gas? It's going to cost more maintenance. It's going to cost more. People are going to want to steal it. There's a higher risk of all these things when I could have just got a Chevette, achieved the same purpose, and not have to worry about all these other things. But I think clients often get preoccupied with the bells and whistles around the contract, that they don't focus on the actual key requirements that they need.
Yeah, but let me throw this your way, okay? The client is assuming that the client might be an insurance broker, it might be a property management company. They may, in most cases, they don't have security professionals to guide them, okay? So the client says, I'm going to go to the company A or B or C. They're a security company. If I'm an insurance broker and you come to me for insurance, I can tell you what, I know about insurance, so I can give you guidance and a service and advice. I go to a security company, I expect the same thing. So I blame this back on the security companies. In my business, in the work that we have done, I have said no. I mean, no one likes to turn away business, but my rationale for saying no is that if I say yes, and this is great, I send you an invoice, and at the end of the day, I don't make you happy, what have I gained? I've got the one invoice, and then I have an enemy out there in the marketplace bad-mouthing me. It's not worth it. But many companies, security technology and security guard companies, rather than say no, they say yes, and we'll try and wing it. Years ago, when I was in the armored car industry, many, many years ago, and I was with Brinks, and I was a robbery investigator, and it was comical to watch our sales guys would go to the banks and promise the world. Yep. And then after they sign the contract, they go to the operations guys, say, "This is what you got to do." And they said, "What? We can't do that." "Well, you got to figure it out." And they walk away, they high-five themselves, they say, "We got the contract, got the commission." There's that disconnect. So I think, rather than put the onus on the client, the security operator has to realize that it's in his interest to get it right, because if he doesn't educate and steer the client right, he's going to wear it at the end of the day. And my favorite expression is, I tell my son, "How does that end up for you?"
Yeah, it always ends up bad. I'm just going to, I'll just put in one other thing. I think that I still go back to the client because they have to do their homework. If they're not prepared to do their homework and pick the right people, that doesn't help the situation. And I'll give you a quick example. For us, when we were looking for, we were going to roll out an access control system across the country. It was a national initiative. And the national team at that time, I wasn't part of it, but they got sold a bill of goods from a guy who was supposed to be a world-renowned consultant, engineering designer, that was, well referenced according to the person who recommended him. So he comes into town, and of course the client is taking him at his face value, didn't do the background, didn't do the reference checks. It was only afterwards when we found that the system he was promoting was a disaster. It had to be ripped out of all our freaking buildings at a significant cost. Okay, and we found out then that all the data that we were storing for all these great buildings was basically in his garage. It was Joe's garage that was running an access control platform for a national enterprise system, right? And that was on us. We didn't do our due diligence. We didn't do our background. And now the people who were competing against him, legitimate integrators, couldn't compete because the guy's prices were so damn low, right? So we were forcing them to go down to a bottom dollar that didn't really exist because this guy had no business being part of that process. So that, to me, was on us. The client should have done better to prepare what the hell we wanted, make sure the people we invited were qualified candidates, vendors, and then you can talk about, the client's promising us, but they're promising us based on a credible set of expectations. We've done our homework.
Yeah, but listen, I know the organization you're talking about, and I know that story well. How has that turned out for that organization? They're still thriving. They're at the top of the heap. How's it worked out for that service provider? I think he's living in his mother's basement. The point is that the client got hurt, but the client recovered. The client was able to, the client has nothing good to say about this person, this organization, and this organization doesn't exist anymore. So you're right. There's blame on both sides. There's responsibility on both sides. But I think it's more incumbent on the service provider. If service provider integrity, you're a CPP, okay? You've been in the industry a long time. A big part of being a security professional, like being a police officer, is integrity. It's not muscles, it's not strength, it's honesty, it's integrity. It's doing the right thing even if someone's not watching, even if the person's not watching. I think the industry has to pull up its socks and say, look, integrity first. We cannot do this. This is not what we do. I mean, there's more of a chance of taking the small, because it's a small community that we live in, taking that small community and get them to raise their game and start being honest and understand their capabilities, than to look at the community of potential clients that are out there of all shapes and all sizes that aren't fortunate to have people like you and perhaps me running their security programs. Its likelihood of changing that is very, very minimal. The likelihood of changing the industry, holding the industry to a standard, is a lot better. It's a lot more likely. It's a lot higher. I just don't understand how, from an ethical point of view, we as an industry get away with some of the things that we get away with.
Yeah,
it's not, and I'm not damning the whole industry, because I'm going to get all sorts of emails and phone calls afterwards. The majority of people, certainly that I hang with, are real professional. But it blows me away, some of the large organizations, not that they're being deceptive, but they are so focused on the bottom line. There's that yin-yang thing, okay? And I'm not saying anyone is wrong, But I really think if you build it, they will come to you, okay? You may lose this account, but if you're doing it right, if you have the reputation for integrity and engineering for predictable, successful outcomes, you may lose in the short run. You're always going to win in the long run. But I think we don't look at the end game. We look at the short game. That's the big.
Hey folks, Lucky Luciano here, reminding you to visit our sponsor, BrianClaman.com, where his team of experienced professionals can help you build an effective security program that balances risk with the needs of your business. And please don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoy our podcast and help spread the word by sharing us with your network. And now, back to protecting your assets. So that's a good segue into the next part because I want to keep us moving along. And that is, how do we know that we're setting expectations? Well, how do we know? We know when we're setting expectations. How do we know that we're meeting those expectations? And that's where the key performance indicators come in. And I think these have become more of a challenge in recent years because certainly clients have are being more and more inclined to introduce penalties if you don't meet them. There has been I think a positive trend in some of the contractors that I know or vendors that I know who are working towards more of a rewards-based system. If you do better than what they expect, they're going to give you more, as opposed to focusing on the negative and the penalties. They're trying to shift more towards positive behavior and positive outcomes, which I think is a good thing. You want to, I mean, nobody likes getting shit on at the end of the day.
I don't, but I'll let you finish, and I'll tell you. But then I'll tell you you're wrong.
Oh my God!
Did you fall off your chair?
All right. Well, I'm going to go into how do you set those KPIs, or do you want to talk about it before I get into that?
Just 2 seconds, okay? The reason I'm against bonuses, if you will, okay, and I like penalties, is you're giving someone a bonus for doing what they're paid to do. That is just a cop-out. That is just wrong. I mean, if a person does what they have
to do. Better. This is for better than what they agreed to. Not that's the difference.
But you know what the bonus is if you do better than what you agreed to? That you keep your job, and when the contract expires, they're re-signed.
You are not a modern manager.
No, honestly, because that's just a cop-out. I'm not going to pay anyone to do. I'm going to reward them. Listen, you know, because you've been in the same boat. I've turned over companies at the end of the contract that haven't produced. And companies that have produced have been with me for a long, long time. And they've reaped tens of millions of dollars. Yep. That's the benefit. So you're wrong.
Yeah, but you're in the Wild West, my friend. I'm telling you, the new these are the new generation. These are kids who grown up in the environment that everybody gets a star, everybody gets the participation medal, and that's where we're at, Brian, whether you like it or not. That's what makes people perform. So it's not about doing what you've promised. I'm going to promise you that I'm going to be 90% attendance, closed shifts. Shifts aren't going to be open. 90% of the time we're going to fulfill our shifts. So I am meeting that expectation. If I go to 95%, then they're going to get a bonus ribbon or a star. That's the future, my friend. You may not like it, but I'm telling you, that's where they're going.
Today is Saturday. We're recording this on a Saturday,
yes.
1915. And, I've been working nonstop all day. And why am I working nonstop all day on a particular contract? Okay. Not because I want a bonus. I want the client, when they pay the bill, to say, hey, these guys are pretty good, and invite me back. So let's sort of agree to disagree. I think you're right about the participation star.
Yes.
Young people, you don't win a soccer game anymore. Everyone participates. There's no first star. Everyone's a star. I think that's a problem. And it
is a problem. I'm not agreeing with it. I'm just telling you the reality.
But if I'm in the position of power, okay, in that I'm the client, and there's one client, there's a lot of providers, I'm going to do it the right. I'm not going to fall prey to this nonsense.
But listen, bro. How many times? And you have to be honest. How many times when you were asked to prepare a report for the board or for the CEO, did they revise it to make it nicer, to change your wording, certainly, to their wording, which may have sent the same message, maybe, probably not, but certainly would have been a lot softer than we would typically send that message. And that's all I'm talking about. Like, the world is changing, whether we like it or not. I'm old school, man. I like it. You know me. I tell you straight as it is, whether you like it or not. But that's cost me a lot of points in certain companies that I've worked for, right? They don't want to hear that. And that's similar with the contract-client relationship. The client doesn't want to hear that. So let's focus on the good stuff. And the more good stuff you give me, the more I'm going to reward you.
Well, yeah, but that example you gave with the board or the C-suite, you changed my report or my words and everything. That's not the bonus. I interpret that I'm getting a message that if I can't figure out how to write in a way that meets their needs, I won't have a job. So like that example doesn't really make your point to me. I just think that you're paying for when I bought a motorcycle. I love motorcycles. I bought a Honda Goldwing. It's an expensive bike and everything like that. It exceeds my expectations. It's the best bike in the world. I got news for you. I didn't go back to the Honda dealer and give him an extra $5,000. I expect him to exceed my expectations.
All right, let's agree to disagree on this one. I think, I'm not disagreeing with you. I think that the world has changed. I think the business world is moving towards this more positive mentality and all that. And it's, whether it's good or not, we'll see.
Okay. Or can we sing a verse of
Kumbaya?
Kumbaya, my lord. Kumbaya.
I knew you're going to go there.
Oh, jeez.
All right. So let's get to how we figure out whether or not we're meeting those expectations. And I think it's a term that most people in the business or any business should be familiar with. And that's it's called SMART. The framework's called SMART. And basically, you set key performance indicators by keeping them specific so you know what the hell you're trying to measure. It's got to be measurable, right? It's got to be a concrete measure. It can't be just, it looks like it's good. You got to have some kind of a scale that clearly dictates how you know whether or not you're doing well. It's got to be, what's that?
Quantitative, not qualitative.
Right.
Yeah.
It's got to be achievable. These, your KPIs cannot be so far off the grid that the guys aren't going to be able to meet it because you're just setting yourself up for failure. They'll give up. They'll get frustrated, that kind of stuff. It's got to be relevant to your needs, which I think is an important one. As obvious as that might sound, I've seen some KPIs that just make you shake your head as, why are we even measuring this? And sure enough, you take it to the client or the client gets it and they're like, well, we don't even look at that stat. So then why are we measuring that? Because it's taking up time, effort, and frustrates people. And then the last one is it's got to be time bound, right? There's got to be a time in which you're trying to measure it. So that encapsulates the whole SMART process. I think it's valid. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's valid also. I think it's valid.
We agree.
Well, no, we agree. But I think there's a lot of companies, and I think you may know who I'm talking about, and they have really good SMART KPIs, but they're KPIing the wrong thing. There's two parts to a contract. There's the business part to the contract, and there's the operation part to the contract. And given that most contracts are very lean on what the deliverable is and how you measure the deliverable and the associated KPIs, what I find is too many KPIs are looking at billing errors. Okay, do the bills come on time? Like the technical stuff and not the operational stuff. Technical stuff is important, but as far as I'm concerned, not as important as the operational stuff. Because if you're spending $1 million, $2 million, $3 million a year on security, and the bill's on time, but the guard's asleep at the desk, you've wasted your money, but the KPI is not going to reflect that.
Yep.
That's the weakness with many KPIs. They're KPIing in a smart way the wrong things, or not all the right things.
So I think the only two components then that should be added onto that, and that's a good segue because I found this other one that's smarter, not just smart. And smarter refers to evaluating your KPIs to make sure that they're meeting what they, and then readjusting them, right? To make sure that you're getting what you're supposed to be getting. They're not going to be perfect, and they change over time. Things change, technology changes, programs change. So you have to change your KPIs to keep up with the way your program matures and the differences that come out of that. So that's a smarter program to develop KPIs. I'm going to go into, or I want to go into how do we create those KPIs? If that's okay with you, sir.
I'm just blown away that you came up with smarter. You're finally talking my language. I'll just be quiet and listen now.
All right. So how to create your KPIs. First of all, you want to determine your end goal. And then you want to ask yourself some questions as to what you're looking for to achieve that end goal. What is the data that you're going to need to be able to say I've achieved that end goal? Identify the information that you're going to be needing and how are you going to collect that? And then determine how frequently you want to collect it. Obviously, is it monthly, weekly, daily? Some of them are daily, right? We have blogs that track daily. And set short and long-term goals for those KPIs to figure out what what the markers are that you're looking for, and delegate responsibility for those KPIs. If you're just putting them out there and then nobody cares about them, what are you doing it for? Assign it to somebody. Usually it's a security manager or the vendor's security supervisor or contractor that manages KPIs, but somebody needs to own it and then be prepared to report those back and talk about those.
Yeah, I agree entirely. One of the things I like to do, because managing KPIs is a time-consuming job, and a lot of clients just can't bother. So something that I tried and that I like is I do monthly KPIs, and then I do semi-annual or annual audited KPIs, and it works this way. I tell the vendor, I tell the supplier, you KPI yourself. Here's the criteria I'm looking for. You self-report, you self-assess. And people shake their head at me and they say, Brian, you're crazy. They're not going to tell you we're doing a terrible job. And I said, if you have a mutually respectful, trusting relationship where it's okay to stumble, as long as you try and identify what you did wrong and fix it, okay, it works. And this is the way my version works. The contractor KPIs himself each month and he submits it. You look at it and he's saying everything's great, everything's great. When I do the audited one once a year or twice a year, it better say everything's great. If the audited one, the one that we validate, says it's a shit show, and the contractor says he's great, he's now violated the trust. And I make that very clear, and it's in their interest, to be honest. The other thing with KPIs is it's okay to fail. It's okay to make a mistake. I believe in penalty clauses, but I believe in penalty clauses just to get someone's attention. If a person does not score well on the KPI the first month or the second or the third, my question will be, okay, thank you for telling me. What's the problem, or what are we going to fix it? If 6 months down the road it ain't fixed, then I have to ask myself, is this guy bringing value? And if he's not bringing value, then either you invoke the penalty clause or you terminate the contract. That's sort of the way I see it. It's a partnership. And most contractors are going to be reticent at first till they know you, to be brutally honest. It's hard to tell someone you've screwed up or your organization has screwed up. But if it's not an I got you show, but, oh, you screwed up, why? Well, we didn't have enough manpower for this reason because of COVID. Okay, what can we do to fix that? Once they realize it's not to get you, but it's to make the program work and the contract successful, you're going to get contractor buy-in. But it's up to the client to prove that it's not a gotcha exercise. That's
very important. I think it's, we talk about, and I don't know, you're probably going to disagree with me, but I think it really is a partnership. You have to work together. If you approach it as, I'm just here to be your, to fulfill your job, and then as soon as I step out of line, the client's like, you're out of here. Sure. Yeah, you're right. Technically, you can do that, but is it really beneficial for the long-term health of your program? If you're switching out integrators every 3 months, first of all, you're going to get a reputation, and there's some properties downtown who have that reputation. The transit hub downtown that we're familiar with had a notorious reputation. Every 6 months, they were throwing people out. Nobody wanted that contract. Right. And so that's not good for the client either. So it really is a partnership, understanding what the objectives are and working together to achieve that. You talked about your KPI report, and I just want to touch on what should be in those KPI reports for listeners. What should be part of those reports to give you some value. Obviously, the goal needs to be clearly identified. What is the metric that they're trying to measure? What are the numbers? How do they make sense? And what's the rationale for that metric? So you understand why you're seeing it. How often are you seeing that metric? That needs to be in that report as well. Are we doing these monthly? Is it a weekly report? Is it an annual report? Different time spans reflect different issues. Where are you getting that data? I think is important to understand. Is it coming from a guy's, puts his finger up in the air and figures out where the wind's blowing today and picks a number? Because some people do that. Or do they actually have systems that are tracking those patrols and those open shifts and whatever it is that you want? And I think it's also important to present those the KPIs to your clients in a visually appealing way, right? Nobody wants to just see numbers. So use some pie charts, use some graphs, color it up a little, and then dumb it down. And I don't mean that in a negative thing, but we've got, especially in security, like policemen, right? They've got terminology that's resident to the business that only guys in the business really understand. And the property manager may not be familiar with that. And certainly the CEO or a board may not be familiar with that. So you really need to be cognizant of the language you're using when you're reporting KPIs. Bring it down to their level so that they understand what they're looking at. and be prepared to answer those questions.
Well, I like your term, dumb it down. I am the king of dumb. And what I like on my KPIs is it really is it has what the quantitative deliverable is. And then there's two boxes, red and green.
Mm-hmm.
You either are doing it or you're not doing it. There's not an in between. You know, quite honestly, if you do CPR on someone, you either save them or they die. There's no in between. And I'm amazed when I see a KPR and it says a 1 through 5. 5 is excellent. 1 is a failure. Oh, you're a 3.6. You know, that's qualitative. It's like a traffic light. I don't even like the yellow light. Red, stop. Green, go. Red, you're dead. Green, you're alive type thing. So I think to your point, you've got to dumb it down. You've got to make it easy. We're all busy. Our contractors are busy. We're busy. I want to see a 1 or 2 page report looking at the most salient points that measure success. I don't want to look at a 25-page report. I want to see, are you doing it or not? And if you're red isn't dead necessarily. If you're red, I'm going to ask 2 things. Why are you red?
Yep.
And what are you doing to fix it? Because you're allowed to make mistakes. Because if you KPI'd me, oh my God, there'd be a lot of red. But once my boss tells me what I did wrong, I work very hard to do it right, because I realize if I don't, I'm bringing no value and I may not have a job.
Yeah, and the benefit is you know what you need to do to get better. It's clear.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And so just end it off on my end. To your point, keep it simple and concise. Don't go on and on about some dribble that isn't applicable. Just keep it, red pass or red fail, green pass. That's all. That's as complicated as it needs to be. We talked about using the visuals, color it up. Don't make it just numbers. People get bored. They don't want to see that. They tune out, and that's not helpful. Simplify the technical information. Again, dumbing it down. I think this is a good one. Be truthful. Don't bullshit these people. Eventually, they're going to find out, and it's worse for you. Just tell them what it is. And to your point, it's the response that they're looking for. What are you doing to change it? Everyone screws up. We all know that. So what are you going to do to make it better next time? 2 more points on this. I think it's important to include historical data, right? So you can see whether they're improving or not. Yeah, they could be red this month, but they've been green for the last 24 months. So, something's happened. What is it? Let's figure it out. And keep it regular, right? You want to consistently bring those reports forward. Don't just do it once and say, we're shit and that's it. Well, let's see what we do over the 6 months. Do we get better? Do we get worse? Keep it consistent.
Yeah, and this sort of goes back to where we started. And by doing that, we're managing expectations of both parties. The client is making it very clear what their expectation is in terms of deliverable. The contractor is telling the client how they're doing and where their pain points are. And I tell you, I had no problems when I'm dealing with the contract. If the contractor has worked with me, has identified the issues, if he says the issue is with the quality of guard is we're not paying enough, I've got no problem to say, okay, let us see if we can pay a higher bill rate so you can get a better guard. Because it's my interest to do it. But don't just come to me and say you want more money. Demonstrate to me why we need more money. Demonstrate to me that, you know what, Brian, you pushed really hard for a $16 an hour guard. This is the result. Here's the data to demonstrate it's not that we're failing, but our hands are tied behind our back. You're going to convince me, and I'm going to see value in you, and I'll see you as a trusted partner because you're managing my expectations. You're telling me what's real, telling me what's not real, and that's, I think, the essence of a good partnership.
And on that note, I'm going to leave it there. You summed it up very well. It is about partnerships. For those of you listening, we would be happy and appreciate it if you could subscribe to our web podcast. We're trying to build the audience. We're doing that, but all the help we can get, we appreciate it. Hit the like button if you like what you're hearing. And if you want to know more about how we manage expectations, how we set up KPIs, visit our sponsor, brianclaman.com. And we're happy to help. Just give us a call and we'll take it from there. So till next time, have a happy holiday because this will be our last episode before the new year. And we'll see everybody in 2022. Brian?
Yeah, just very quickly with KPIs, this is our 33rd episode, which is exciting. How would you rate me if you were KPIing me? Never mind.
I'm going to give you a 3.6.
out of 3? Okay.
No, it's been fun. I like these things. I hope our listeners are benefiting from our discussions, but I enjoy our debates, and that's why we do them.
Well, yeah, and we don't take ourselves too seriously.
Yep.
I think that's important. I think we try and convey some meaningful information and have some fun along the way.
Exactly. So with that, folks, have a happy holidays, and we'll see you in 2022, Brian.
Yeah, happy Festivus, happy holidays, happy Merry Christmas, happy Hanukkah. Be safe, everyone.
That concludes this podcast. We hope you enjoyed listening and will join us in a couple of weeks for our latest episode. Please remember to like and follow us on our sponsor's webpage, brianclaman.com, where you can leave us your comments and suggest topics you'd like to hear about in future episodes. Until next time, thanks for listening, and don't forget to protect your assets.